The night was soft and quiet in Willow Hollow, a little town where the moonlight always seemed to hum a gentle lullaby. In a cozy burrow under the big silver oak, Benny the bunny was curled up in his tiny bed, his ears twitching at the faint sound of something unusual. It wasn't the usual cricket song or the rustle of the wind. This sound was rhythmic, a gentle chuff-chuff, like a heartbeat in the night. He sat up, blinking his sleepy eyes, and hopped to the little round window. Through the glass, he saw it, a shimmering train track glowing right in the middle of the meadow. The rails weren't made of iron but of stardust, twinkling and bending through the dark like a ribbon of light. A long train with silver carriages and windows glowing warm gold slowed as it neared his burrow. At the front, the engine puffed clouds of glitter that floated up into the night sky, joining the stars. Benny rubbed his eyes again to be sure he wasn't dreaming. But the sound of the train's whistle, soft and melodic like a lullaby, told him it was real. The door of the nearest carriage slid open, and there stood a tall conductor in a navy blue coat, his hat tipped politely. "Evening, young traveler," the conductor said with a smile that crinkled his eyes. "This is the Star Train. We're heading to the Moonlight Peaks, the Dream Gardens, and the Starry Falls. There's a seat waiting for you." Benny's little heart thumped. He'd never left Willow Hollow at night before. But something in the conductor's voice, warm and patient, made him feel safe. He grabbed his softest scarf, tucked it around his neck, and hopped out into the cool grass. The train's steps glowed faintly under his paws as he climbed aboard. Inside, it was warmer than a blanket fresh from the sun. Cushioned seats lined the carriage, each with a small blanket folded neatly. The walls shimmered faintly, as though they were holding a bit of the night sky inside them. Benny sat by the window, and when the train began to move, the meadow outside slowly melted into a sea of glittering stars. The Star Train didn't seem to follow the Earth's tracks at all. It rose into the sky, gliding along shimmering rails that looped through constellations. Benny leaned close to the glass, watching the silver oak of his home grow smaller and smaller until it looked like just another speck of light in the vast night. A gentle hum filled the carriage, as if the train itself was singing a quiet song to the sleepy passengers. And just then, Benny saw them other travelers. A hedgehog in a little wool hat sipping hot cocoa, a fox with her eyes half closed wrapped in a golden shawl, and even a pair of tiny mice sharing a biscuit. They all nodded at him with drowsy smiles, as if to say, "Welcome to the ride." The conductor passed by, offering Benny a mug of warm milk that smelled faintly of vanilla and honey. Benny took a sip, feeling his eyelids grow heavier, but he didn't want to sleep just yet. Not when there were stars so close, he could almost touch them. Benny kept his paws wrapped around the warm mug, the steam curling up and tickling his whiskers as the Star Train drifted higher into the midnight sky. Outside, the world below had disappeared entirely, replaced by a vast ocean of stars so close he could see their soft glow pulsing like tiny heartbeats. The train's wheels didn't make the usual clanking sound he'd heard in storybooks. Instead, they whispered, a smooth shhhsh, like waves brushing against the shore. The hedgehog across from him introduced himself as Harold, his voice slow and gravelly like he'd told many bedtime tales before. "First ride?" he asked, his little round spectacles sliding down his nose. Benny nodded shyly, and Harold grinned. "Best decision you'll ever make. The Star Train knows where you need to go, even if you don't." Before Benny could ask what that meant, the fox in the golden shawl leaned over from her seat. Her fur shimmered slightly under the lantern light. "They say each stop shows you something you've been dreaming about your whole life," she whispered, as though sharing a secret. The two little mice squeaked in agreement, crumbs from their biscuit dusting their tiny paws. The train suddenly gave a gentle lurch, and the soft hum deepened, as if announcing their approach to something extraordinary. Outside the windows, stardust began swirling in great arcs, drawing shapes in the air of flowers, waves, spirals that danced and dissolved into sparkling mist. The conductor strolled through the aisle again, this time carrying a tray of tiny silver keys. "Every passenger gets one," he said, handing Benny a key that was cool to the touch. You'll know when to use it. The key had a small engraving, a sleeping crescent moon, and Benny couldn't help but run his paw over it again and again, wondering what door it might open. The scenery outside shifted, and Benny's breath caught in his throat. A vast glowing garden floated in the distance, suspended in the air as if resting on invisible hands. Every tree had branches dripping with lantern-like fruit that swayed in the gentle night breeze. Streams of liquid silver ran through fields of flowers so pale they seemed made of moonlight. Fireflies danced in slow spirals, leaving trails that hung in the air like ribbons. As they drew closer, Benny noticed that the flowers weren't ordinary. Each one had petals shaped like tiny sleeping animals. He saw a bloom that looked just like a curled-up squirrel, another shaped like a little swan with its head tucked under its wing. The whole garden seemed to hum, the sound deep and soothing, as though the earth itself was breathing in rhythm with the passengers' hearts. The train slowed, and a soft chime rang through the carriage. "Dream Garden stop," the conductor announced. "You may step out if you wish, but be mindful, what you pick here stays with you, even after you leave." Benny hesitated for only a moment before sliding off his seat and padding to the open door. The air outside was cool and carried the faint scent of lavender and honey. He hopped down onto a path that glowed under his paws, feeling each step sink slightly as though walking on a cloud. The other passengers wandered quietly, their voices low and gentle so as not to disturb the dreamy stillness. Harold the hedgehog plucked a star-shaped bloom and tucked it into his scarf. The fox knelt beside a stream, trailing her paw in the silver water until it reflected her golden shawl like sunlight in winter. Benny wandered further, feeling drawn to a particular cluster of flowers that swayed slightly even though there was no wind. One flower stood taller than the rest, its petals curling open slowly as if it had been waiting just for him. Inside was not a sleeping animal shape but something even more surprising, a tiny reflection of his own burrow back in Willow Hollow, glowing softly. Benny gasped and reached out, his paw trembling as he touched it. Warmth spread through him instantly, like the memory of home wrapped in a blanket. When he turned to look back at the train, he noticed something else. Faint threads of light were connecting the flowers each passenger had chosen back to the star train itself, weaving them all together in a glowing web. The conductor's voice carried gently through the air. "Time to return. The journey isn't over yet." Benny clutched his flower and hurried back aboard, slipping into his seat. As the train began to move again, he looked out the window one last time at the dream garden, watching as it slowly faded into the distance, the starlit petals swaying a soft goodbye. Benny leaned his head against the glass, the dream garden still glowing in his mind, when the star train curved around a bend in the galaxy and entered a region of darkness so deep it felt like the whole sky had gone quiet. The soft chatter of the passengers faded as if they, too, could sense something different about this part of the journey. Even the lanterns inside the train dimmed slightly, casting the carriage in a warm, hushed amber glow. The wheels whispered softer now, and Benny felt the rhythm slow to a calm, steady beat. Outside, the darkness wasn't empty for long. Tiny pinpricks of light began to appear, forming intricate patterns, long, swirling trails that connected like threads in a cosmic tapestry. The fox in the golden shawl tilted her head and murmured, "We've entered the Starlight Pass." If you listen closely, you can hear them singing. Benny strained his ears, and sure enough, there was a faint melody in the air. It wasn't like music played by instruments, but more like hundreds of tiny bells being rung far away, their tones weaving together into a sound that seemed to make the heart feel lighter. The hedgehog, Harold, smiled knowingly. "Those are the constellations," he said. "They only sing when the star train passes through." A faint mist began to form along the outside of the windows, curling upward like the steam from Benny's earlier tea. The mist didn't block the view, instead, it seemed to enhance it, making the lights outside shimmer as though they were alive. As Benny leaned closer, the lights shifted again, and shapes emerged. The first was a great silver whale, its vast tail sweeping through the darkness as though it were swimming in an endless ocean of stars. Beside it, a school of smaller fish-shaped constellations darted and twirled in perfect harmony, leaving trails of glitter that slowly dissolved. Higher up, a stag made entirely of gold light leapt between invisible mountains, its antlers brushing the edges of the night. The conductor strolled through the aisle, carrying a small velvet pouch. "This is a special part of the journey," he said softly. "Everyone may take a single star drop if one chooses to follow you." Benny blinked. "Follow me?" The conductor nodded, handing him the pouch. Inside were the tiniest droplets of pure light. They pulsed gently, almost like breathing. "When a star drop chooses you, it will guide you to something you need most," the conductor explained. One by one, passengers held the pouch and waited, but most of the star drops simply stayed still. Then, when Benny held it in his paws, one star drop rose from the others and floated upward, casting a gentle beam on his face. It drifted out of the pouch and hovered just above his flower from the dream garden, as if recognizing it. The moment it touched the petals, the flower glowed brighter, and Benny felt that same warm pulse spread through him again, but deeper this time, as though the light had wrapped around his very heart. Suddenly, the singing of the constellations grew louder, and Benny's gaze was drawn to a vast archway ahead, made entirely of braided starlight. The star train slowed as it approached, and through the arch Benny could see a city suspended among the stars. Delicate bridges of light connected towering spires, and each spire was topped with a glowing dome that sparkled like crystal. As the train passed through the arch, the city seemed to hum in greeting. Small winged shapes darted between the towers, not birds, but glowing creatures that looked like a mix between fireflies and tiny dragons, their wings scattering flecks of light as they moved. The fox leaned closer to the window. "That's Lamora," she whispered. "A city where dreams are stored until they're ready to find their way to the dreamers." Benny pressed his paws against the glass, watching in awe as the train rolled past balconies lined with shimmering orbs. Each orb held a different scene: a child flying on the back of a bird, an old man fishing from a rainbow, a dog sleeping under a blanket of stars. They floated gently above the balconies, waiting to be claimed by someone, somewhere, in the world below. The star drop hovering above Benny's flower flickered, and he felt an odd pull in his chest, like the city was calling to him. But before he could think about stepping off, the conductor's voice floated through the carriage. "We don't stop in Lamora," he said, his tone kind but firm. "Dreams here come to you only when they're ready." Benny sat back, his eyes still fixed on the glowing city as it slipped further and further away behind them. The star drop settled back above his flower, its glow a little brighter now, almost as if it had learned something. The train hummed on, and slowly the constellation lights began to fade, the darkness thinning until the sky ahead filled with a faint pink and lavender glow. The fox straightened in her seat. "Ah," she said softly, "we're almost at the Dawn Bridge." Benny had no idea what the Dawn Bridge was, but he could already feel a tingling in his paws, as though something very important was waiting there. The star train drifted forward into the lavender glow, the hum of its wheels changing ever so slightly, softer now, almost like a lullaby being whispered through the rails. Benny pressed his nose to the glass as the light ahead grew brighter, spreading in gentle ripples until it felt like the whole sky was being washed with color. Then he saw it. The Dawn Bridge wasn't made of wood or stone. It was woven entirely from strands of golden light, each one shimmering and pulsing like it carried a heartbeat. It arched gracefully between two enormous clouds, both shaped like sleeping giants, their outlines glowing faintly in the rising light. Beyond the bridge stretched a sky that seemed half night, half day. Stars still twinkled overhead while the horizon began to bloom with the soft blush of morning. As the star train slowed to a near stop, the conductor appeared again, his lantern casting a warm halo across the aisle. "The Dawn Bridge is a place between dreams and waking," he announced gently. "It reveals something you carry, sometimes a memory, sometimes a wish, sometimes a truth you didn't know you needed." The doors opened with a soft hiss, and the passengers stepped out one by one. Benny followed, his paws touching the golden strands of the bridge. The moment he did, he felt them hum under him, the vibrations traveling all the way up through his chest. It wasn't an unpleasant feeling, more like the bridge was greeting him. The fox in the golden shawl stepped ahead and closed her eyes. As she did, the air in front of her shimmered, and suddenly a scene appeared, a wide meadow under a setting sun, where a much younger fox ran freely, her fur bright with the joy of youth. The fox smiled faintly, and the scene faded. Harold the hedgehog waddled forward next. The light in front of him spun like water circling a drain before forming into an image, a small workshop filled with tiny tools and half-built clockwork toys. On a shelf sat a single finished toy, a little bird with silver wings. Harold reached out as though to touch it, and for a moment his eyes shone with something between longing and pride. Benny hesitated when it was his turn, the star drop still hovering over his dream garden flower. He stepped forward onto the center of the bridge, where the light was brightest. The golden strands beneath him pulsed stronger, and the air in front of him began to ripple. At first, he saw only faint colors, but then shapes emerged. A grassy hill appeared, dotted with wildflowers that swayed in a warm breeze. Sitting on the hill was a much younger Benny, smaller, fluffier, with eyes wide in wonder. Next to him sat a large, soft-feathered owl wearing a midnight blue cloak. The owl was reading aloud from a book, her voice carrying that slow, soothing rhythm that made the words feel like they wrapped around you. Benny's breath caught in his throat. He recognized that owl. It was his grandmother, the one who used to tell him bedtime stories before she disappeared into the great journey, as she called it. The scene shifted, and young Benny leaned against her, half asleep, while she tucked a small pouch into his paws. He couldn't see what was inside, but he heard her voice clearly, "Someday, you'll know where this belongs." The vision faded, leaving Benny standing in the soft glow of the bridge, the star drop above his flower pulsing like a heartbeat. He could feel it now, whatever his grandmother had given him, the star drop and the flower were leading him toward it. Before he could ask anyone what it meant, the bridge gave a soft chime, like the ringing of distant bells. The conductor's voice carried over the hum of the light. "It's time. The bridge gives its gift, and we must move on before the morning fully wakes." Reluctantly, Benny followed the others back toward the train. As he stepped onto the platform, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. The dawn bridge shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, Benny thought he saw the silhouette of his grandmother at the far end, her cloak billowing in a wind he couldn't feel. She raised a wing in a slow wave before the light swallowed her image entirely. Back inside the carriage, Benny settled into his seat, the flower glowing softly, the star drop still keeping pace above it. He felt a strange mix of comfort and curiosity, like the bridge had shown him not an answer, but the path toward one. As the star train began to move again, Harold leaned over. "Whatever you saw, it stays with you," he murmured. "And sooner or later, you'll find out why." Benny nodded quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Ahead, the sky began to darken again, but this time it wasn't night approaching, it was a swirling storm of shimmering blues and silvers, the kind that looked both beautiful and a little dangerous. The fox adjusted her shawl, her eyes narrowing. "Next stop," she said softly, "the cloud harbor. And you'll want to hold on tight for that one." The star train glided forward, the rails now seeming to curve through the very sky itself, weaving between drifting clouds tinged in pale silver. Benny pressed his face to the glass, his little nose fogging the window as he tried to get a better view. The swirling storm from before had softened into a luminous mist, and through it, enormous shapes began to emerge, not buildings, not mountains, but clouds shaped into strange, intricate forms. They weren't just clouds hanging still in the air. They moved, stretching and folding like living creatures. One resembled a great whale, its broad, billowing body rolling slowly in the air while smaller cloud fish swam alongside it. Another looked like a tree with hundreds of long, twisting branches that reached into the night, its blossoms glowing faintly pink. And in the middle of them all was a cluster of cloud structures that almost looked like ships moored together in a floating harbor. The conductor appeared once again at the front of the carriage, his lantern glowing like the heart of the mist. "Welcome to Cloud Harbor," he said with a smile. A place where the clouds rest and trade their dreams. As the train slowed, the harbor grew larger, until Benny could see walkways made from braided ribbons of cloud stretching between the ships. Each vessel was shaped differently, some like giant seashells, some like wide lily pads, others shaped like great open flowers. The air was filled with a soft music, almost like the sound of rain tapping gently against glass, and every now and then, a breeze carried the faint scent of vanilla and fresh rainwater. The train came to a gentle halt, and the doors slid open. The moment Benny stepped outside, the cloud beneath his feet gave slightly, like walking on the fluffiest pillow imaginable. The air felt cool but gentle, wrapping around him like a feathered blanket. Harold the hedgehog waddled along behind him, his little spines dusted with mist, while the fox in the golden shawl walked ahead with calm confidence, her paws leaving faint ripples in the cloud floor. A towering figure approached them, a cloud being, tall and graceful, with flowing robes made of vapor that shifted between shades of pearl and pale gold. Its face was not quite solid, yet not quite air, its features forming and reforming as it spoke in a deep, slow voice. "Travelers," it said, inclining its head. "Welcome to our harbor. Here, we trade in the currency of wishes, and every visitor must leave something behind to take something with them." Benny tilted his head. "Leave something, like what?" The cloud being's form shimmered, and a soft tendril of mist curled toward him, touching lightly at his chest. "A memory, a feeling, or a dream you no longer need," it said. "In return, you may take a fragment of another's, to keep, to protect, or to guide you." The fox stepped forward first, placing a small, glowing pebble into the being's hands. It pulsed once, then dissolved into the mist, and in exchange, the cloud being handed her a tiny jar of golden light. She tucked it safely into her shawl without a word. Harold was next. He produced a silver gear from his pocket, worn and tarnished from years of turning. The moment the cloud being touched it, the gear vanished into a swirl of mist, and Harold was given a delicate glass feather that shimmered with rainbows. Benny hesitated. He had nothing in his pockets, no trinket, no keepsake. But then he remembered the dream garden flower and the star drop hovering above it. He stepped forward slowly, holding them out. "Can I give you this?" The cloud being studied it, its form flickering faintly. "Ah, not a gift to discard, little one," it murmured. "This is still growing. This will one day show you the truth you seek." Benny's ears drooped a little. "Then I have nothing to trade." "Not so," the being replied. "You may offer a memory, one you no longer wish to carry." Benny thought for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes and thought back to the day he had stood at the edge of his village, watching the path where his grandmother had walked away on her great journey. He had never forgotten the ache in his chest, the hollow feeling that she wasn't coming back. Slowly, he imagined that ache lifting from him, like a stone being taken from his paws. When he opened his eyes, the cloud being was holding a small, gray pebble that pulsed faintly. It dissolved into mist, and in return, the being placed something warm and round in Benny's paws, a small, pearl-like sphere that glowed softly from within. "A fragment of another's dream," it said. "It will fit with your star drop one day, and together, they will open the path." Before Benny could ask what that meant, a low, echoing horn sounded through the harbor. The conductor appeared at the far edge of the cloud walkway, his lantern swinging. "Back aboard. The sky is shifting, and the winds will turn soon. We must reach the star pools before the moon's last quarter." Benny tucked the pearl carefully into his satchel, right beside the flower and the star drop. As he followed the others back to the train, the harbor around them began to glow faintly blue, the cloud ships rocking gently as if preparing to sail away themselves. Once aboard, Benny settled back into his seat, clutching the satchel close. Outside the window, the cloud harbor faded into the mist, and the train's wheels began their soft hum again. But this time, Benny's mind was filled not just with wonder, but with a quiet, growing sense that all these pieces he was gathering were leading somewhere. Somewhere important. The gentle sway of the star train carried Benny deeper into a soft, endless night, where the moon's light brushed the clouds like silver paint. The lamps in the carriage dimmed to a warm amber, and even Harold the Hedgehog's little snores seemed to blend with the steady rhythm of the wheels. Benny kept his satchel close, feeling the faint glow of the pearl and the soft pulse of the stardrop inside. The conductor passed slowly between the seats, his lantern now casting star-shaped beams on the ceiling. "We're approaching the star pools," he murmured in a voice that felt like it could hush an entire forest. "It is a place where dreams touch the surface of the sky before drifting down to those who sleep below. Not many are invited there." Benny's heart beat faster. Outside, the sky began to open up, revealing a vast expanse of shimmering light. It wasn't water in the pools, it was liquid starlight, collected in great round basins floating in the air, each one rippling with color and tiny moving images. Some showed children tucked into bed, smiling in their sleep. Others shimmered with faraway places, beaches, mountains, deep forests, all woven from threads of dreamlight. The train slowed until it stopped at the edge of a wide, crystal bridge that arched out over the pools. Benny stepped down onto it, the cool surface humming faintly under his paws. The air was crisp and sweet, like the very first breath of a winter morning. Above them, the stars burned brighter than anywhere he had ever seen, as if they too were leaning closer to watch. Waiting at the center of the bridge was a tall, robed figure with eyes like pools of molten gold. In one hand, it held a staff tipped with a star-shaped crystal, in the other, a bowl carved from some glowing, translucent stone. "Welcome, traveler," it said, its voice deep but soft. "You have come far, carrying pieces of light and shadow both. Tonight, you will see why." Benny stepped closer, his ears twitching nervously. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "I'm just me." The figure knelt, bringing its golden gaze level with his. "Because you notice what others overlook. You carry not just your own dreams, but the fragments of others, and you keep them safe." It gestured to his satchel. "May I see them?" Benny carefully opened it, laying the flower from the dream garden, the stardrop, and the pearl from the cloud harbor into the bowl. The moment they touched, a faint glow began to spread, the colors weaving together like threads in a tapestry. The pearl melted into a swirl of white and gold, the stardrop flared like a tiny comet, and the flower slowly unfolded, revealing its center, a delicate spiral that began to spin. The bridge beneath them thrummed as the spiral opened wider and wider, until it became a tiny window in the air. Through it, Benny could see a little home in his village, and there, by the fireplace, sat his grandmother. She looked exactly as he remembered, warm eyes, gentle smile, but she was holding something in her lap, a tiny box made of cloud and starlight. Benny's breath caught. "Grandma." Her image flickered, but she looked straight at him, as though she could see him just as clearly. "My dear Benny," her voice whispered, echoing in the air around him. "I left on my great journey not to leave you, but to make sure you'd find the path to where dreams are born. This place, these friends you've met, they're your bridge between worlds. Keep them safe, and they'll keep you safe, always." Benny felt his chest swell with something too big for words, joy, relief, and a deep, calm warmth. The image faded, but the feeling remained, wrapped around him like a blanket. The robed figure took the bowl back and poured its contents into the largest of the star pools. The ripples spread outward, and everywhere the light touched, the dreams in the pools grew brighter, warmer. Benny watched as the images shifted, children laughing, gardens blooming, quiet fires glowing in little homes. "It is done," the figure said. "You have returned what was given to you, and in doing so, you've made the dreams of many stronger. Now, it's time for you to rest." The conductor appeared again, his lantern swinging gently. "Come along, Benny. The star train will take you home." As Benny boarded, Harold curled up beside him, and the fox sat opposite, her golden shawl now glowing faintly in the lantern light. The train began to move, leaving the star pools behind. Outside the window, the pools grew smaller, then disappeared into the horizon, replaced by the familiar shapes of clouds and distant constellations. Benny's eyes grew heavy, but he smiled as he leaned back. For the first time in a long time, his heart felt full. He didn't know if he'd see his grandmother again in the waking world, but now, he knew she was never far. The Star Train's lullaby hum filled the carriage, and soon, Benny drifted into the softest, most peaceful sleep he had ever known. Far away, in the quiet of his village home, the night sky shimmered with a few extra stars, and one of them, if you looked closely, seemed to glow with the shape of a little bunny's smile.